As deer season winds down, a lot of people are thinking about their food plots for wildlife. Joining us now is our Extension Wildlife Specialist, Dwayne Elmore. Dwayne, let's talk a little bit about what a food plot is and some of the pros and cons.
Sure. A food plot is an agricultural planting that's done to attract wildlife. And a lot of people have misconceptions about what they can and can't do. The primary thing that they are effective at is as a harvest efficiency tool. As far as bigger antler size or better body condition of animals or increasing the carrying capacity of the land, in certain situations they might be able to do that, particularly if you have really poor habitat. But generally, they're not going to be very effective at those things. You'd be much better off to spend your funds on prescribed fire, timber thinning, timber harvest, things that we know have a big impact at the landscape level. But food plots are very helpful to help you increase harvest of deer, primarily doe deer.
And let's talk a little bit about some of the differences that you see associated with bucks versus does when it comes to food plots.
Yeah, well, outside of the rut, most mature bucks are nocturnal. So you're not going to see a lot of use, even though they might actually be on the food plots quite a bit, but it's after legal shooting hours. But it is going to see a lot of use of does during the early morning and late afternoon periods. And so if you're trying to harvest more does on your property, if you think you have too many deer or you just want more deer for the freezer, then winter food plots are really effective at doing that. But because the food plots are not so effective at increasing body condition and animal health, except under certain circumstances, we don't really emphasize summer food plots as much as we do the winter plots.
And what types of forages do you think work best on the winter plots?
Well, certainly annuals such as rye or winter wheat are great. They're cheap, well adapted to Oklahoma, and they're usually established well. If you're going to have a perennial plot, one that lasts for multiple years, then you might want to incorporate in some type of clover or other legume, but these are more costly, so if you're planning on replanting every year, just stick with the annuals.
Now we're out here at the food plot that you and your researchers developed. Tell us a little bit about how this is organized as we walk over to the cage you have set
Sure.
up here.
Well, one of the things that people usually call and ask about is this time of year is they think that their plot was really unsuccessful, because as you can see here we've got a lot of bare ground, and what I always advise them to do is put up some type of cage when they plant, and this will give you an accurate idea of how much forage you're actually producing, because in this situation we've excluded deer and rabbits with this woven wire fence, and you can see that the stand is actually fairly well established. We have good germination of both the legume and the wheat in this case, and most of the bare ground is just associated with herbivory by deer and rabbits in this plot.
So this really helps you assess whether it's successful or not.
Absolutely. And if you really want to know how much you're producing, you could clip the vegetation inside this plot, dry it and weigh it, and clip a comparable size outside the exclosure, dry it and weigh that and compare, and you'll not only know how much production per acre you're getting, but also what proportion of that the wildlife is consuming.
And what kind of advice do you have for people who are thinking about setting up a food plot in the future? What's a good size to consider?
The main thing is just to, if it's meet your objectives. If your objective is only to attract animals for harvest, it probably doesn't need to be very large, maybe an acre or 2 acres at the most. If it's really small, like 1/8 of an acre, 1/4 of an acre, the animals can consume it pretty rapidly, and it might not be as attractive later in the hunting season. You don't necessarily need a lot of these on the landscape if your habitat is in good condition. So I would advise people to spend the vast majority of their resources, time and money, on prescribed fire and thinning their forest, have a lot of early successional browse, and use food plots as just a tool in the toolbox, but not the primary tool to manage for whitetails.
Okay, thank you very much. Dwayne Elmore, our Extension Wildlife Specialist.